The opulent ballroom of the Omni Shoreham Hotel in Washington, D.C., shimmered with a patriotic pride that felt entirely unearned by my presence there. Medals glinted under the chandeliers, silk flags draped majestically, and the air crackled with the hushed anticipation of sacrifice and honor. I was Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes, standing ramrod straight in my impeccably tailored Navy service uniform, but inside, a familiar knot of pain tightened with every calculated breath. My eyes, trained to scan horizons for threats, instinctively cut through the crowd to find them. My family, my mother, Carol, sat beside my father, Richard, both with polite, almost bored expressions. My older brother, Mark, barely concealed a sneer as the presenter droned on. "Such a waste of your potential, Evelyn." I could almost hear his condescending drawl, a soundtrack that had accompanied me through countless family gatherings, holidays, and phone calls. This night, this very moment, should have been a triumph. It should have been a celebration of my silver star, a medal for extraordinary heroism. But with them here, it felt less like an honor and more like another public trial where I was always found wanting. They still don't get it, I thought, the familiar ache settling in my chest. They never will. The chasm between me and my family hadn't appeared overnight. It had been a slow, insidious crack, widening year by year, until it became an unbridgeable gulf. It started, as most things do, the day I told them I was enlisting. I'd just graduated top of my engineering class from Annapolis, and instead of taking the lucrative offers from defense contractors or tech giants, I chose a different path. I remember the dinner table, the expensive china gleaming under the chandelier, the suffocating silence that fell as I delivered my news. Dad, usually so composed, had exploded, slamming his hand down so hard the silverware jumped. His face, normally a stoic mask, was red with fury. "The Navy? Evelyn, after everything we've done for you, all those private schools, the tutors, the university preparation, you could be a CEO, a partner at a prestigious firm, something respectable, something that actually builds wealth and status like Mark." Mom, ever the worrier, had wrung her hands. "But darling, it's so dangerous, so unladylike. Why would you choose to put yourself in harm's way when you could be building a lovely home with a nice doctor, settling down, giving us grandchildren?" And Mark, who'd already inherited Dad's booming real estate business and carried himself with an air of inherited entitlement, had leaned back in his chair, a smug smirk twisting his lips. "Yeah, Evie, going to spend your days scrubbing decks, huh? What a waste of an expensive education when you could be making real money like me. You always did have strange hobbies." My attempts to explain, the sense of purpose, the chance to serve my country, to use my engineering skills in ways they couldn't fathom, the legacy of service I actually admired, were met with blank stares, veiled pity, and a clear message. You are choosing wrong. You are disappointing us. In their eyes, I was throwing my life away. Even as a child, I'd felt like the quietly competent one, overshadowed by Mark's louder, flashier successes. He was the golden boy, charming and charismatic, always the center of attention, the star athlete, the popular one, while I was the brainy one who preferred books to parties. He won popularity contests. I won academic awards and science fair ribbons that my parents proudly displayed for exactly one day before they were relegated to a dusty shelf in the study, making way for Mark's latest sports trophy or business school certificates. My acceptance to Annapolis, a dream come true for me, a testament to years of grueling study, an opportunity for genuine intellectual and physical challenge, was met with a perfunctory nod from Dad before he launched into a 20-minute monologue about how proud he was of Mark's early business ventures. It wasn't just a career choice I was making. It was a fundamental rejection of their carefully constructed narrative for my life, their vision of the perfect daughter. It was me charting my own course, and they saw it as a defiant act rather than an aspirational one. During my 4 years at Annapolis, the distance only grew, while my classmates were pulling all-nighters studying propulsion systems or tactical strategies in the engineering labs, forging bonds that would last a lifetime. My family's phone calls consisted of Mom reminding me to date a nice lawyer from Georgetown, or Dad asking if I'd reconsidered a civilian career again. Mark would call, ostensibly to check in, but mostly to brag about his latest sports car, or a huge real estate deal, casually slipping in. "So, still playing dress-up, Evie? Did you at least get a good tan on your sea cruises? Heard the Navy has decent beach access." Their thinly veiled skepticism and outright mockery became a constant, dull ache, a background hum beneath the rigorous demands of military life. Every promotion I earned, every commendation, was met with lukewarm acknowledgement, quickly overshadowed by Mark's booming achievements. They simply couldn't comprehend the intellectual rigor, the immense responsibility, the raw courage required to excel in the modern military. To them, I was just Evelyn, who wore a uniform and did something. My first deployment after commissioning, a 6-month stint in the Pacific aboard a guided missile destroyer, was particularly telling. I was an ensign then, fresh-faced, but already deeply immersed in the complex world of naval engineering and operations. The days were long, the work demanding, and the stakes often high. I remember calling home, exhausted but exhilarated, after troubleshooting a critical sonar issue that had baffled more senior engineers. I explained the intricate diagnostic process, the pressure, the satisfaction of getting it right. Dad listened, then sighed. "Well, that's certainly specific, Evelyn. Mark just closed on his second multi-million-dollar apartment complex in Miami. Now that's real work, building something tangible that puts money in your pocket." The call abruptly ended with Mom reminding me to be careful. It was a pattern that repeated over years. My quiet contributions, my tangible impact on national security, always dismissed as lesser than Mark's flashy, public-facing successes. I served. I excelled. I put my life on the line. But to them, I was just doing my little Navy thing. As I climbed the ranks, the work became even more specialized and classified. My engineering background, far from being wasted, propelled me into the Navy's most cutting-edge intelligence and special operations support. I wasn't scrubbing floors. I was building and deploying state-of-the-art surveillance systems, developing predictive analytics for threat assessment, and leading teams that tracked hostile actors across the globe. My days were spent in secure, underground facilities, affectionately known as the tank. These were places where the air hummed with the silent power of servers, where global conflicts unfolded on vast screens, and where a single piece of intercepted data could shift the balance of power, avert a crisis, or save countless lives. My work was vital, often life or death, but inherently secret. I couldn't tell my family about the 3 a.m. calls, the adrenaline surges, the crushing weight of knowing that thousands of lives could hinge on my analysis, or the faces of the operatives whose safety depended on my precision. My promotion to lieutenant commander came after a particularly harrowing year. I had just returned from a complex, multinational counter-terrorism operation in the Middle East. It involved intricate data analysis, predicting enemy movements, and coordinating multiple intelligence agencies. It was emotionally and mentally draining, but also incredibly rewarding. When I finally called home, eager to share the news of my promotion, the conversation quickly pivoted. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear," Mom said, almost distractedly. "But you know, your cousin Sarah just got engaged. He's a wonderful corporate lawyer. When are you going to settle down, Evelyn? Don't you want a family?" Dad's contribution was a gruff, Good. More responsibility, I suppose. Just make sure it doesn't interfere with your real future." It was clear their priorities lay elsewhere. Then there was the mission, almost 2 years ago now, that led to the Silver Star I was receiving tonight. A scenario straight out of a thriller. We were tracking a rogue cargo ship, the Sea Serpent, suspected of transporting illegal arms, and, more critically, kidnapped American aid workers in the heavily monitored waters of the South China Sea. I was the lead intelligence officer for a special operations team tasked with providing real-time analysis to our SEALs, who were preparing a covert boarding operation. The initial intelligence had been murky, conflicting reports coming in from multiple sources, and the clock was ticking down to the insertion window. I remember staring at the screens in the dimly lit command center, the glow illuminating the tense faces of my team. Suddenly, a new data stream, a faint, almost imperceptible signature, flashed across my console. It contradicted all previous intel we'd received, indicating a heavily armed ambush awaiting our SEALs at their primary target point. My gut screamed. Every fiber of my being told me this was critical, even though the data was unverified, and came from an unconventional, highly sensitive source. Hold position. I barked into my comms, my voice cutting through the tension, overriding the mission commander's last orders. The intel has shifted. I'm seeing an anomaly. Confirming now, but do not proceed with the original plan. The commander's voice, usually calm and measured, was tight with frustration. Hayes, explain. We're on target. We have a narrow window, and every second counts. Sir, I replied, my voice as steady as I could make it, even as my heart hammered in my chest. My analysis indicates a secondary hostile force, armed and waiting, not part of the original intel. They're walking into a kill zone if they go in now. Give me 30 seconds to cross-verify. It was a calculated risk, a decision based on a whisper of data, and years of honed intuition, trusting my instincts over the established intel. The room held its breath. A few agonizing seconds later, the confirmation flashed across my screen. A hidden patrol boat, bristling with weapons, just as I'd predicted. My call, that single risky decision, saved their lives. The mission was successfully rerouted, the cargo seized, the aid workers rescued, and not a single SEAL was lost. The collective sigh of relief in the command center was almost audible, a wave of exhaustion and triumph. My team looked at me with a silent, profound respect. That night, after the adrenaline finally drained away, leaving me bone-weary in my sterile apartment, I stared at my phone. A text from Mark popped up. Enjoying your DC vacation? Don't work too hard on those spreadsheets, sis. Heard Mom and Dad are coming to my awards dinner next month for my Entrepreneur of the Year award. You should try to make it, if you can get away from your desk. It's a big deal. The irony was a bitter pill. While I was making life-or-death decisions that shaped international security, protecting American lives, they still pictured me at a desk, pushing paper. Admiral Thornton, who knew every single detail of that mission, had been a rock. He'd personally seen the after-action reports, the commendations from the SEAL team, the quiet praise from the higher-ups. As he pinned the silver star to my chest tonight, he leaned in, his voice a low, serious murmur. You've earned this, Evelyn. More than you know. Your call that night, against all initial data, was nothing short of miraculous. You saved an entire team, and likely prevented an international incident. You are a hero, Lieutenant Commander. I simply nodded, the familiar ache for their approval still present despite his praise. But it is what it is, sir. He just smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. Not for much longer. I put in a request a few months ago. It just came through. A request, sir? I asked, confused, my mind racing through possibilities. For a different kind of recognition, he said, his smile widening, one that even the most stubborn minds can't ignore. Just be patient, Lieutenant Commander. Tonight might have a second, even more significant surprise for your family. My mind reeled. A second surprise. What could he possibly mean? The Medal of Honor? It seemed impossible. That was for the battlefield, for infantry, for pilots, for those who faced the enemy directly, guns blazing, not for a signals intelligence officer working in the shadows. It was for heroes. And while Admiral Thornton had called me one, I never saw myself that way. My role was vital, yes, but unseen. The ceremony proceeded. a slow procession of valor and sacrifice. Other brave service members received their well-deserved awards, their stories inspiring, each introduction building the atmosphere. Then, the master of ceremonies, a distinguished captain, returned to the podium, his voice taking on a different timbre, a note of profound solemnity. A hushed anticipation fell over the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonating with gravitas, "we have one final, very special recognition this evening, an award that speaks to extraordinary heroism, to valor above and beyond the call of duty, often in circumstances of extreme danger, risking one's own life to save others, and distinguishing oneself conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity. It is our nation's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom, then an audible murmur of awe. My own breath hitched in my throat, my heart slamming against my ribs with a sudden, frantic rhythm. The Medal of Honor? No, I thought. It can't be. Not me. My eyes instinctively flicked to my family's table. They were stunned, exchanging confused, almost frightened glances. Mark's jaw actually dropped, his confident smirk utterly obliterated. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Even Dad, usually so composed, looked utterly bewildered, his usual air of subtle disapproval replaced by a panicked, disbelieving stare. Then, the master of ceremonies continued, his voice ringing with profound pride. "Tonight, we have the distinct privilege of awarding the Medal of Honor to a true American hero for her conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as part of a special operations unit in a hostile combat zone. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hayes." The spotlight hit me, a blinding beacon. My name, echoed through the vast hall, amplified, undeniable. A wave of murmurs and excited whispers filled the room. Then a thunderous roar of applause erupted as people, en masse, rose to their feet, their cheers deafening. My fellow officers stood at attention, sharp, unwavering salutes cutting through the air. Admiral Thornton, his eyes glistening with pride, gave me a small, encouraging nod. My legs felt suddenly unsteady, lightheaded, but I walked towards the stage, the roar of the applause following me like a tidal wave. As I approached the podium, I kept my gaze fixed on the president, who was already extending his hand, but I could feel their eyes on me, a physical weight. My family, still seated, frozen in their shock, an island of stunned silence in a rising tide of honor. Mark's face, moments ago sneering, was now a mask of utter disbelief, tinged with a sickly green hue. His eyes darted from me to the Medal of Honor draped on its velvet cushion held by an aide, then back, as a dawning comprehension, mixed with raw, sickening envy, slowly spread across his features. He couldn't reconcile the sister he knew, the one he mocked, with the national hero being celebrated. Mom's eyes were filled with tears, a confusing mixture of shock, profound awe, and the crushing weight of realizing how incredibly, utterly wrong they had been about me all these years. Her hand remained clutched over her mouth, muffling a choked sob. Dad, the stoic Richard Hayes, just stared straight ahead, his usual air of subtle disapproval completely shattered, replaced by a bewildered, almost panicked expression. He shook his head almost imperceptibly, as if trying to deny the reality unfolding before him. The years of dismissal, the casual cruelty, the unwavering belief in his own infallible judgment, all seemed to crumble around him in that single, devastating moment. The president's handshake was firm, his gaze filled with genuine respect. His eyes held a warmth that pierced through my emotional haze. "Lieutenant Commander Hayes," he said, his voice soft but clear, "the nation thanks you. Your courage represents the very best of America." As he placed the Medal of Honor around my neck, the weight of the nation's gratitude felt almost tangible, a heavy, cold comfort on my chest, anchoring me to the reality of the moment. The applause reached a fever pitch, a deafening wave of sound that seemed to physically wash over my family's table, leaving them isolated and exposed in their stunned silence. In that moment, standing on that stage, bathed in the spotlight, surrounded by the highest echelons of military and government, the chasm between me and my family felt less like a crack and more like an unbridgeable abyss. Their petty criticisms, their narrow-minded views of what constituted real work, seemed to shrink into utter insignificance against the backdrop of this monumental recognition. The girl who they thought was wasting her life, playing soldier, was now standing as a recipient of the highest military award in the country, recognized by its commander-in-chief. After the ceremony, the ballroom transitioned into a bustling reception. I was immediately surrounded by a throng of well-wishers, generals, senators. Even the Secretary of Defense approached me, their words sincere, their handshakes firm. Reporters clamored for a statement, their cameras flashing. It was a dizzying blur of recognition. Through it all, Admiral Thornton stayed close, a quiet guardian. He gently guided me towards a less crowded corner, towards a discreet side door. "Evie," he murmured, his eyes twinkling, "I believe there are some people who need to have a word with you in a slightly more private setting." My gaze followed his, and I saw them, my family. They were a small, awkward cluster, hesitating at the edge of the crowd, looking utterly out of place. They began to move towards me, slowly, hesitantly. Mark reached me first, his face pale, eyes wide and unfocused. He attempted his usual swagger, but it crumbled around him. "Evelyn," he started, his voice a strange mix of anger and bewilderment. What was that? You never told us. All these years. You lied." Mom rushed up, tears streaming down her face, her carefully composed facade completely shattered. "Evelyn, darling, why didn't you say anything? We were so worried. Why did you keep this from us?" She reached for my hand, but I instinctively pulled back. Dad, Richard Hayes, finally approached. His shoulders were slumped, his posture defeated. He couldn't meet my gaze. His eyes darted around the room, anywhere but at me. "Evelyn," he said, his voice a low, raspy whisper, barely audible above the din of the reception. "The Medal of Honor. I don't understand." I looked at them, their faces a canvas of shock, confusion, and raw, undeniable regret. Mark's desperate attempts to save face, to frame my secrecy as a lie, were transparent. Mom's tears felt like a belated performance, a desperate attempt to bridge a chasm she had helped create. Dad's shattered pride was palpable, a crumbling monument to his own rigid expectations. "I didn't lie to you," I said, my voice steady, calm, and utterly devoid of the emotional charge it once held when I spoke to them. It was a strange, liberating sensation. "I told you I was joining the Navy. I told you I was in engineering. I told you I was deployed. You just chose not to listen. You chose to diminish it. You chose to believe what fit your narrative, not what was real." I looked at Mark. "You called my career playing dress-up, a vacation, pushing paper. You bragged about your real work, while I was coordinating ops that saved lives, including, perhaps, some of yours, indirectly. Did you ever once ask me what I actually did?" I turned to Mom. "You worried about me finding a nice doctor to settle down with, while I was leading teams, making life-or-death decisions. Did you ever once ask me if I was happy with my career, or if I found fulfillment in my service, or just when I was going to get married?" And then I looked at Dad. He still couldn't meet my eyes. "You said I was wasting my potential, that the military was for those who couldn't do anything else. You judged my life based on your outdated expectations, on whether it generated enough tangible wealth. Did you ever once ask me about the skills I developed, the problems I solved, the impact I had?" Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant murmur of the reception. My words, delivered with a quiet, undeniable truth, seemed to land with the force of physical blows. Mark stammered, unable to form a coherent response. Mom's tears flowed freely now, genuine, perhaps, but also helpless. Dad stood utterly defeated, His shoulders slumped, his once indomitable presence diminished. "This isn't for you," I repeated, my gaze sweeping over all of them. "This medal, this recognition, it's for the sacrifices. It's for the men and women I served with. It's for the nation, and it's for me. Not for your approval. Not anymore." I turned then, offering a small, genuine smile to Admiral Thornton, a silent acknowledgement of the long journey and the final, undeniable vindication. I offered a polite nod to my family, still frozen in their chairs, and walked away, moving to speak with the line of dignitaries and fellow service members who eagerly awaited me. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked away, a mixture of shock, regret, and a dawning, uncomfortable understanding in their gazes. The silence from my family was no longer a sting, but a profound testament to their own misjudgment, a silence I finally understood and no longer cared to fill. Months turned into a year. The initial media frenzy faded, but the quiet respect remained. The calls from home are different now, hesitant, often. Mark sometimes sends me news articles about military tech or asks about Pentagon life in a tone that lacks its former condescension, almost deferential. He even once, awkwardly, asked for my opinion on a national security article. Mom sometimes calls just to chat, without trying to steer the conversation to marriage or civilian jobs. And sometimes she even asks about my current mission, genuinely curious. Dad is the most changed. He doesn't call as often, but when he does, his voice is softer, more reflective. He never brings up Mark's business anymore unless prompted, and he built a new, beautiful mahogany display case in their den, prominently placed in the center. Not off to the side is a framed photo of me receiving the Medal of Honor, right next to his own commendations and Mark's business awards. It's a small gesture, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but I see it. It's a quiet acknowledgement, a form of respect I never thought I'd receive, a subtle admission of how wrong he'd been. I still serve. My work remains challenging, often dangerous, but it is deeply fulfilling. The external validation from my family is no longer a prerequisite for my happiness or my self-worth. I found that within myself, forged in the fires of adversity and cemented by unwavering dedication. The pain of their dismissal, which once felt like a brand, has faded, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. My story, I've realized, isn't about revenge. It's about truth. It's about proving to myself what I always knew, even when others refused to see it. And sometimes, the greatest triumph isn't about making others acknowledge your light, but simply shining so brightly that they can no longer deny it. My story reminds us that true worth isn't determined by the opinions of others, but by the strength of our own convictions and the impact we have on the world. What did you think of my journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of triumph over adversity, be sure to subscribe.